Hello everyone, welcome back to Sellers Pocats, or welcome to Sellers Pocats. I forgot to film a second wrap-up. Oops. I did a first video of books I'd read in June, which was like roughly a week and a half-ish after the start of June, and we were already at a lot of books and I already yapped a lot. I'm going to be linking the video here, don't you worry. You can rewatch all of that if you have already seen it, or you can just enjoy my very original thoughts on whatever it was I read in the beginning of June. And I fully intended to make at least another video, but then I started reading, and I started reading very fast, and things got out of control very quickly. So I have decided that what we're going to do today, instead of me trying to cram every single book I've read, apart from the first like 7, I believe, that I talked about, into a wrap-up video where I talk almost extensively about the thoughts I had on these books. What I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow from the, right now, decently popular idea of yes, no, maybe that some people have adopted for their TBR slash wrap-up videos, where they hold books into the camera and they basically say yes, they would recommend it, no, they wouldn't recommend it, or maybe they would recommend it with some caveats as to why we're in between the two extremes here. Usually, the tagline is with little to no explanation. We all know myself, me and I don't think little is going to cut it, and I don't think no is going to cut it either. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to play yes, no, maybe with the 30 books I managed to read in June. And however long it takes is how long it takes. Let's get into it. So first of all, and I have these on a piece of paper, so I actually remember they exist, out of the 27 books, 3 were not from my physical TBR. Which means I did read, no, out of the 33. Did I say 30? Whatever. 27 of the books I read in June were from my physical TBR, some of which I'd bought in June or received in June, some of which I had previously, one I read for university. A lot of different things were going on. And because I tend to forget books that are not directly in front of me, we're going to start with the 3 audiobooks that I listened to in the month of June. All 3 of these were queer, and I got all 3 of these from Libby. So, let's get going. The first one I listened to, if I remember correctly, was How to Get a Girlfriend When You're a Terrifying Monster by Marie Cardno. Yes. Is the story very well thought out? No. It's mainly about monster romance, it's mainly about, hey, I go insane when I look at you in my dimension, but in your dimension I'm perfectly fine, so maybe we should try and figure out how my tiny human brain can look at your eldritch form in the real world and still be madly in love with you. Tiny, teensy tiny bit of spice, not like a full-on sex scene, as far as I remember. Very sapphic, very cute. Highly recommend the audiobook, actually, because it was a lot of fun. Next, I do believe my next audiobook was, we were back in romance, monster romance territory, was She Came From the Swamp by Darva Green. This is a witch slash swamp monster romance. Very loosely Shrek vibes, because the monster woman is very green and very wonderful. Yes. Once again, like with the first one that I read, I personally wouldn't go into this expecting a whole lot of story. It was mainly smut. There were a lot of decent smut scenes in there that I quite enjoyed. We did play around a little bit with the monstrous woman thinks she's too monstrous for a human anything, and human is actually turned on more when monster is in monster form. We had some butch representation with our main human character being a butch lesbian. There was like some plot in the background that had like almost mafia-esque ideas of like the human's family gets rid of bodies and they're dumped in the swamp, but also we don't really want to do that anymore. So we had some of those vibes, but they were vibes. There was not really a lot of plot going on there. I do believe this is also part of a series, so there's a chance that other books are going to expand on the story, but don't expect story. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. But if you are coming for the monster romance, I would personally say it's worth your while. And last but certainly not least, with the audiobooks, we have Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. This is also the first in a series, though I don't think book 2 has come out yet. Maybe. I I enjoyed parts of it. I liked the overall setting. It's basically like a Western dystopian piece of fiction where librarians are supposed to give out like only the right kind of books and the right kind of knowledge to the people, but also once we join the librarians we figure out that all of them are like genderqueer lesbians essentially. I had some fun with the setting. I think there was a lot of real potential there. I think that for the amount of time the audiobook took, which was not a lot, I think it was like 9 hours maybe, there was a little bit too much going on. And I'm not sure I appreciated the protagonist for who she was. She came across as very naive, very much not well versed in whatever was going on. And while I understand where we were coming from, we were trying to portray a character who came from a very censorship-friendly world and was now being introduced to a lot of things very quickly. I think either it was the audiobook's fault, because I'm not a huge audiobook listener, or it was just the book itself, but it didn't really come across as like someone from a very repressed part of society learning about new opportunities, and it also sometimes grated on me a bit. I would say try it out if the setting sounds interesting to you, especially in the current age of book banning, because I do think it made some really interesting points there and it worked with that premise. I just wouldn't expect overly much from it, right? I think I'm just gonna leave it there. Right. Okay. So, I don't remember necessarily what of the books I talked about. So I will try, if I remember that I talked about it previously, I'm gonna try and keep it briefer. Otherwise, we're just gonna speed run through some of these, okay? Okay, great. Right, for university, I had to read Twelfth Night by Shakespeare. This is one of his comedies, and it was actually one of the comedies I never had any contact with. Maybe. Number one, it's a play. If you don't like reading plays, don't read this play. Rather try and find a recording or try and find a video of the play or watch the play in a theatre somewhere is my go-to recommendations when it comes to plays. Or listen to it alongside reading it. Something like that. It wasn't as funny as I expected it to be. There were some incredibly absurd scenes. Downright diabolically weird. So that threw me a little bit, but it was very good in some aspects, and I really liked the genderqueer fuckery that we had going on. This is probably one of Shakespeare's more genderqueer plays. The man was genderqueer all across the board if you think about it for a hot second, but this one probably takes the cake, I would say, in a lot of like ways when it comes to, well, representation is a big word for this. The way of dealing with gender. How about that? Okay, so Twelfth Night by Shakespeare. Next, I'm just gonna grab from the pile. I do believe that I talked about this one in the other video previously. Her Pretty Night by Maria Ray Birch, which is the first book in the Sapphic Lady Knights series. Again, it's one of those series that only has like singular volumes following singular pairings, and you can read them whenever and in whatever direction, I suppose. Yes, this was a wonderful palate cleanser from some of the really heavy books I read, and also I loved the characters, I loved the chemistry. I am a sucker for knight characters giving all of their devotion to another character. Okay. The only thing that could have topped this would have been knight and king, or queen. But this was the absolute next best thing, which is knight and person they're sworn to protect for one reason or another. I really liked this. It wrapped up a bit too neatly, but overall, this was such a good time. I'm incredibly excited to continue with the series, even though I know it's going to be different characters, but still, if they have like even half the shipping potential that Della and Galleon had, or Sir Galleon, I'm sorry, I'm gonna eat everything up that this author has ever written in their entire life. So excited. Next, this one is for all my German-speaking friends. This is Prism by Katerina Ushachov. This is dystopian fiction. Yes, I would say yes. There's some stuff that I thought wrapped up a bit too neatly as well, and I think the overall message was one that we are very familiar with, which is, well, maybe programming something and then giving it into the hands of like an overarching entity is a bad idea because they're gonna use it for evil, possibly, probably. I also thought there was one plot twist towards the end that was a little weirdly made. I might have to reread this and look at it with fresh eyes and see if there was more leading towards that going on, because I was for sure not getting the vibes that I was supposed to be getting from the ending, I think. I'm trying to be vague here so that people who can read German can read this without spoilers, okay? All that to be said, it is rather short, it is a rather quick read, and I personally think it is a wonderful representation of polyamory, as well as just overall a lot of fun sci-fi dystopia vibes. Love that. Next, Roses in the Mouth of a Lion by Bushra Rehman, maybe leaning towards yes. Don't read the blurb. Whatever you do with this book, don't read the blurb, because it is going to essentially foreshadow and not foreshadow, foretell the entirety of the novel, and I think it takes away a lot of the growth that our main character Razia goes through, because the back essentially suggests that we're getting to that point of growth a lot sooner than we do, because usually when I read the back of a book, it's supposed to go to like maybe 25% of the book. It didn't. I didn't like that. It is very queer. I quite enjoyed the depiction of different groups of people you could belong to that are being negotiated here, which is one queerness and the other one being, being of a Pakistani American community that is very tight-knit and has a lot of ideas on how you are supposed to be behaving as a person that are clashing with queer identities. I think Bushra Rehman did a great job of like navigating these two spheres without necessarily condemning or condoning both with just 100% in both directions. So, yeah, it's a decent maybe, leaning towards a yes. Next, Heap Earth Upon It by Chloe Michelle Howarth. Yes, prepare yourself. This is, I think in the video I did on the books I read previously in June, I said that this book felt like I was being suffocated. I stand by this, but I think this is an incredible exploration into narrow-minded communities that can choke the life out of you, especially if you start telling lies that you cannot easily get out of again and that you consistently justify for yourself, because, you know, if you tell the truth now, everything is gonna get fucked. Yes, get a therapist. That's all I'm gonna say. Next, similar sentiment. Stag Den's Tori Peters. Yes, check those content notes. There are a lot of content notes online for this book if you just go on Storygraph alone. There's so much shit in this short story collection. I personally really loved it. I know that some people had an issue with the main short story, or like the main novelette, I suppose, which is Stag Den's. The titular story is Stag Den's. I loved it. I loved all of them. I think Tori Peters is an exceptional author, and I think especially in this kind of like almost horror-esque writing is where they truly belong. Or she truly belongs. She? I'm sorry. Hold on. I think yes. Well, you're not really helping me if there's no pronouns in the author description. Come on. Anyway. Yes. Holy shit. You know, that's all I'm gonna say. For the record, I had an exceptional June reading month, okay? So, like, if you see a lot of yeses here, that's because I have great taste when it comes to picking books. Alright, Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis. Yes! Very character-focused, with a plot that is quietly creeping up on you. If you expect this to be a space opera with a lot of action, maybe, because it's not really. But if you're here for the character journey and exploration, and if you're here for the, oh my god, there's a floating hotel in space vibes, 100%, 1000%, yes. Actually, Grace Curtis has quickly become an author that I will be keeping a very close eye on after having just read 2 books in June by her. Next, The Girl with 1,000 Faces by Sun Yi Dean. Maybe, but strongly leaning towards yes. I had some issues with this book, and I'm not fully sure if those issues were just the time that I read it at. or the way that I dealt with the book, the way that I was perceiving the book. I liked a lot of the aspects of it. I liked the ghost aspect of everything, especially like how ghosts are created and why ghosts are the issue that they are. I thought some of the messaging was a little bit oversimplistic, and I wasn't fully sure if I was behind the narrative switch up that we had at some point. Because, like, I saw the point of it, but I thought it was not necessarily super well executed. But overall, this was a really great fun. And I'm honestly excited to see what Sonia Dean is going to bring out more, because I do think this was her second novel. Because, like, her first was The Book Eaters, and I don't think she's written anything in between. So, yes. Also, it's technically not seen as queer on Storygraph, and I understand why, but Sonia Dean is a queer author, and there is a, like, small queer character in there, and generally speaking, I quite enjoyed that. Alright, trying to find the second one of these. You know what? We're just gonna go for something else. The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer, yes. I will say, potential maybe for people who have an expectation of like this book teaching them a lot of things. I think what this book is good for is like opening your eyes to a worldview of like how you can see gift giving within a society as something very different than what a lot of specifically Western societies have told you to believe. It is very short. You can read it in like a day if you want to. It has, I think, just about 100 pages. But there's a lot of, like, thought-provoking material in here, in my opinion, so yes to the Serviceberry. Next up, The Devil She Knows by Alexandra Bellefleur. Yes, yes. I had a great time with this. If you don't like romance, maybe skip this, because this one is paranormal romance. But I liked the setup of, hey, so I sold my soul to the devil to get my ex back, but I'm starting to notice that maybe it's actually a really good thing that that I'm not my ex's girlfriend anymore, because Jesus Christ, there's a lot wrong with this particular relationship. I liked the tension, and I specifically enjoyed how this book handled like a sort of third act breakup, which is usually a make or break point for me when I actually do read romance books, because I'm not the biggest romance fan. And the conflict that a lot of authors put at around the third act usually feels very contrived to me. I think Alexandra Bellefleur did a fantastic job of like making sure that the characters had potential of getting back together because we were guaranteed a happy ending, and I think that was really neat. Also, I love this cover. It's very important to me. Next. Okay, I think this was the last one I read in June. We're not going in any particular direction here, but we have Troubled Bodies by Jake Vanguard. Maybe. I had some good fun with it. It's very gory in a lot of places. I had some issues with how the story was being told. This, by the way, is self-published. Yes, self-published, not just indie published. I'm going to be leaving links down below to buy Jake Vanguard's books. I think this is the only thing they've published. Not entirely sure. But I'm going to be leaving links down below because support indie authors all time and forever. I recommend this if you want a good gory fun. I don't necessarily recommend this if you're looking for like a really cohesive and strong story. And I do also think that some of the perspective hopping was a little bit too much. There's mainly two main perspectives in here. We have Pain and we have Blaze. Both of them are first-person perspective, talking to the other person in the second person. So instead of saying, oh my god, Blaze looked really good tonight, the book would say, oh my god, I think you look really good tonight, Blaze. Something along those lines. I'm not the biggest fan of first-person perspective repeating all the time, so I had some issues with this. And there is technically chapters in here. There's also content warnings in the beginning, by the way, which I think is really nice. Also, my edition is signed because I supported the Kickstarter for this one. There is 5 chapters as well as a playlist in the back. In my opinion, the chapters read a little bit more like very loosely tied together short stories, which is technically a vibe that I'm always for, but I do think there was a little bit too much in each small section for it to have been dealt with properly, which is why I'm giving this book a maybe. but if you're into gory fun and you don't want to think too deeply about the plot vibes, this should be right up your alley. It's also very short, so you know, you can get through it in a single day. Isn't that nice? Alright, we're just continuing onward. By the way, assume every single book is queer unless I say otherwise, okay? Next. I actually got an ARC for this. I want an ARC for this, but then the finished copy showed up earlier than I expected. This is Lost in Space by Rebecca Thorne, the author of Can't Spell Treason Without T. This was fantastic. I recommend this to anyone, so yes, 1,000 times, by the way. I recommend this to anyone who likes Becky Chambers. But essentially we have humans, and we also have aliens, and we also have a sentient moss colony on a spaceship that has abandonment issues. Amazing. I liked the humor in this, and I also liked the, like, human connections we had, the way that our main character Torian really wanted to help her sister who was so sick on the space station. Moss was fantastic, yes, it's just called Moss. Capital M, obviously. Moss was fantastic. I liked the double POV we had going on with Torian and Moss. I thought the author handled that really well. It was also visually distinguished, which I'm a huge fan of. I just had a lot of fun with this. I will say, very slight caveat, it ends, like, there is a definitive climax that gets resolved, but it ends very openly. It is incredibly obvious that this is book 1 in a series, so if you are someone who literally cannot wait for another book in a series to publish, maybe don't read this immediately after this video, okay? Maybe give it a little bit of rest, because I'm pretty sure Rebecca Thorne is just going to continue writing in this series. Otherwise, delightful. Loved it so much. Dare I say, loved it more than the Can't Spell Treason Without T series, and I do really like this one. So, this was a lot of fun. Oh god, my books are about to fall. Right, let's just continue on. Not a queer one this time. We have Carnival by K. Anis Ahmed. Maybe. Strong maybe, but maybe. This is pitched as a culinary thriller. Don't read it if you're looking for a thriller. Literary thriller, maybe. It doesn't have the, like, driving tension that thrillers have, in my opinion. I was able to pivot my expectations very quickly, which is partially because I don't tend to read a lot of thrillers, but people who are really into thrillers don't read this with thriller as a genre in mind, okay? Let it do its own thing, and you might be really okay with it, but I think there's too much build-up to very, like, rather, well, kind of climactic scenes. There's too much build-up to warrant this being called a thriller, in my opinion. I liked the dry humor of it, and I thought the way that this book handled cannibalism, not a spoiler, by the way, look at that cover. I thought the way this book handled cannibalism was really refreshing, and I really liked that. Still, I think thriller is not the best category to put this in. Crime novel isn't either. It's like literary thriller cannibalism with a lot of backstory. I don't know. Try it for yourself. Just don't expect this to be an action-packed thriller, is my point. Next, I'm gonna do these two side by side because they belong together. These are also self-published. We have Architecti and Interitus by Ruby Rowe. This is a dark, what's it called? Dark Gothic romantasy, and I agree with that. Maybe. I enjoyed the sex. Really did. And there's a lot of sex scenes in here, especially in the first book. The second one takes a bit to get to the sex parts. If you're reading this for the sex scenes, yes, do so. If you're reading this for a, like, cohesive plot that also grips you and makes you emotional, maybe to no, because that's not really what I was getting from these books. The writing isn't the best either, but I really liked the sex scenes, okay? Like, that's why I read them. And I think a lot of people who enjoy these types of books know that this is what they're getting. So if you're looking for outstanding lesbian sex, try this duology. If you're not looking for that, and if you rather prefer your books with a hefty dose of plot, no. Maybe, but mainly no. I do think these are stunning though. Look at that. Okay. Next. Okay, let's go this one. Nymph by Sofia Montrone. Maybe to a yes. This is very languid. I think this is a perfect summer read, actually, because it's set in Italy during Ferragosto, which is in August. It's a festival in August. I think the 15th. I could be wrong, though. It is set in Italy. It is very hot as a book, like physically hot. There's not really, there are some sex scenes, yes, but it is physically hot in a way. It describes this cloying sense of heat so well. I read this when we had like 32 degrees, and I can say this was probably the best way I could spend my time while burning up in 32 degrees. There's not like a lot of plot. This is very sensation focused, both in terms of emotions as well as in terms of physicality. I liked where it was going. I liked that there wasn't really a lot of like definitive plot to it. If you are a plot person, don't pick this one up. If you are a person who needs things to be resolved, don't pick this one up. And if you are a person who would like their books without family issues, definitely don't pick this one up. Otherwise, how about this as your summer read? How about you can read this in July, it'll still be hot, don't worry about it. Next, let's do the second Grace Curtis book, Idle Fire. Yes, 100% yes. This was so good. I loved the way that Grace Curtis introduced the characters. I loved the way that the story flowed along and the way that our characters were moving from one place to the other. The world felt incredibly well developed, which I think is fantastic, especially in like this short amount of pages in what is essentially a standalone. There's technically another book for this universe, but it's set like 2,000 years after this one, so you know, the connections are probably going to be a little looser. But if you are looking for a fantasy book that deals with the fall of Rome and also some magic and some sapphics, try Idle Fire, because it was really good. That's my selling point here. Right, next. Okay. On Sunday, she picked Flowers by Yaya Schofield. Yes, this is my 5-star of the month. This is the book I gave 5 stars to. This was incredible. Lush gothic atmosphere, horrendously fucked up women. The way that we dealt with both romantic interest as well as the hauntings of the past in forms of family matters as well as racial trauma was incredible. The language was so good. If you're looking for some gothic fiction, why don't you try this Southern Gothic book about 2 horrendous lesbians that meet after horrendous things have happened and continue to happen to everyone around them. This one right here. 'Tis very good. Next, let's stay a little bit in the like general vibe vicinity. We have Bone of My Bone by Johanna van Veen. Yes. Strong maybe to it, yes. This is my second time reading the author, and I will say I like the general vibes where we're going. I think Bone of My Bone was a little weak in the ending specifically. There was some stuff where I was like, I'm not too sure about this. But I'm giving plus points specifically for the fact that it was set in Germany, set in Bavaria even, and we weren't being weird about German words, which, to be fair, since Johanna van Veen is either Netherlands or I think Netherlands. I should have expected that, but I was very pleased nevertheless, because for some reason, whenever German words are involved in some sort of fantastical setting, it usually goes horribly wrong. For reasons I cannot comprehend. And I really liked the way that vampiric lore was being sucked into the general folklore of the place that we were. This was one of the first times, I think the second or third time, maybe, that I had seen Germanic vampires or Germanic resurrected beings. I've forgotten the word, it's not important. In fiction that weren't like Dracula vampires. So for that alone, Yes, very good, very fun. Next, A Family Matter by Claire Lynch. Yes, you are probably going to be sad about it though. I really liked the overall vibes of the story. I really liked how hard it was to reconcile certain things with each other, and how the family matter was in fact very hard to resolve, because it is very hard to resolve things with your family when you're stuck inside said family and you don't necessarily know how to broach certain subjects, especially if they had happened way in the past and you have no idea of what kind of vocabulary to use with the person you've grown up loving all your life, and now learn that something really bad has happened in the past that you don't know how to cope with. So for that alone, absolute yes. Once again, this is a bit stronger on the plot than Nymph, for example, but again, this is the type of literary fiction where you need to at least be able to reconcile the fact that there's not going to be a lot of plot with the fact that you need to care about people's emotions, okay? Great. Next, Itch by Gemma Amor. Maybe? I had a lot of fun with this. I was entertained by this. I don't think this is necessarily the best horror book I've ever read. I don't think this is the best folkloric horror book I've ever read. And I think some stuff was like a little bit too on the nose for me personally. But I liked the overall vibe. I liked the overall descriptions. And while this book isn't necessarily touted as overly queer, I think it is important to recognize that the main character in this, Josie, comes from a former abusive sapphic relationship. And I think this is important precisely because abusive same-sex relationships are usually not portrayed in fiction. I do understand why, but I think it is important to talk about them every now and again because these things unfortunately do happen. And I think there should be literature for every single one of us, not just the people who find their happy ever after. There we go. Next. The Night of Baba Yaga by Otani Akira, translated by Sam Bett. Maybe, but I did have a good time with this. There's a lot of time jumps in here. It's very action-focused, and the prose is incredibly choppy, which I do think lends itself well to the, like, action scene vibe of it all. It's very brutal, because it portrays the Yakuza, and it portrays specifically what they do and don't do, even with people within their own ranks, okay? So there's a lot. There's also a plot twist there, which again, I think was a little clunkily worked in, and I kind of am looking forward to rereading this with fresh eyes and seeing if there's like more things I can spot as to how we got there. But this was amazing, and also, you know, not to sway you too much, but the author is a lesbian, and I don't know about you guys, but I have not had a lot of experience reading Japanese authors who don't write manga or light novels, who write about queer relationships and are also openly queer. So, something to consider, perhaps, when looking at that particular book. Alright, we're almost done, I promise. 5 more books. Oops! Chlorine by Jade Song. I do believe this was my second best novel of the month, so 100% yes. This was a beautiful horror story into attraction as well as going completely insane over the sports that you've chosen, that it defined your life. The only thing I knew about this before was mermaid horror, and I would say yes, but also in the weirdest way possible that I had not expected. So this was an actual treat to read, and I think this was incredibly fucked up, so hooray! We love that for me, because I love fucked up things. Alright, I think this is the only nonfiction. I think. Possibly, yes. Or maybe the second only. I don't remember right now. Point being, nonfiction. We have Person Unlimited, An Ode to My Black Queer Body by Dean Atta. Yes, this is a memoir style. I've read something by the author before, which was geared more towards a younger audience. This is definitively geared towards an adult audience. And Dean Atta talks specifically about himself, about his own experiences with queerness and blackness, and subsequently homophobia and racism, and how his two not necessarily separate, but parts of his identity sometimes clashed, specifically when in contact with the groups that would have validated that part of his identity, but negated the other part, so to speak. So I do think that if you're looking for like a queer memoir of sorts, I think this one is a nice pick for you. It is rather short. We are under 250 pages. It has a lot of shorter chapters that talk about different parts of his life, so I do think there would be something there for everyone. Next, I'm just going to do these two side by side. I think we have, once again, two books for the German-speaking audience of mine. We have Zu den Wurzeln eine Plantologie, To the Roots a Plantology, and Urban Fantasy Going Fat. These are two short story collections, one all about solar punk, about what happens to plants in our lifetime, sometimes with a little bit more magic, sometimes a little bit more sci-fi leaning, and Urban Fantasy Going Fat is one of their urban fantasy series. This is again from a smaller publisher that I will be linking down below. This is all about own voices, fat authors representing themselves in urban fantasy fiction within the main characters. Sometimes they have to deal with fat phobia, sometimes they are just as confident as anyone could be, sometimes they're magical creatures. You get just about anything. This is my third time interacting with this series. I quite enjoy the series, and I quite like how careful specifically Ashkin Hayadogan is in trying to piece together stories by own voices authors, because I think it is important that people get to tell their own stories before someone else does, or you know, after everyone else already has. So these two are rather short as well. I highly recommend them to my German-speaking audience, or if you've started learning German and you think maybe shorter fiction is the way to go, maybe give these a try, you know, because short stories are always nice. And last but certainly not least, I didn't even mean to end on this one, but you know what? It's a fucking banger. So, Brainworms by Alison Rumfitt. Yes. Jesus Christ, look at the trigger warnings. If you are easily squeamish, no. If you cannot handle a lot of things pertaining to parasites and maggots and eggs and stuff, no, run like the fucking wind. If you cannot handle reading about transphobia, do not pick up this book. If you cannot handle the worst human characters in living existence also being part of a minority that is actively being hunted for sport, don't read this. This is incredibly complex in that regard. It is incredibly hard to pass because we are currently living in a society where a lot of representation is supposed to be very nice and clean. None of that fits for this book, neither nice nor clean in any sense of those two words. This was fucked up. This was so gross. I am not a squeamish person, and I had moments in this book where I was like, okay, alright, okay, that's a choice that we made. Wow. I loved this book. There's like maybe 2 people in my life I would recommend this to. So maybe to a yes. Yes, if you've read the trigger warnings and think you can handle them, okay? This one is at your own risk, is my point. But you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna read everything that Alison Rumfitt writes, because that was something. I quite like this one, but you know. Anyway, that was it. Those were all of the 30 books that I read in June. As you can tell, I had a fantastic reading month. I don't think there was anything I said no to. Some things where I was like leaning towards no, and some things where I had some caveats, because I'm unable to recommend books without caveats unless I know the person that I'm talking to. Okay, so tell me in the comments down below, have you read any of these books? And if so, would you agree with where I put them in this particular list? Are you interested in any of these books, or did this turn you off on some of the interest you had in these books? Because I'm always intrigued to see what people want from their books. I think it's rather fun. And also let me know in the comments down below if there were any like super great books, or any books that stood out to you in your reading month of June. Any books that you found particularly great, or any books that you would go absolutely the fuck not and just, you know, move on from. I'm always curious to see. Alright. With all that being said, July is unfortunately already through the door, which is wild to me. So, I hope that you have a nice reading experience yourself and that you continue having a nice reading experience through the summer. Please remember to hydrate and stay out of the sun at all times, maybe with a book, who's to say. And I will see you guys soon.